Welcome back, everybody. It's Wednesday, Rednesday, March 23rd, 2 p.m., 4 p.m. in Chicago, 2 p.m. here in Vegas. And welcome back. It's Mob Vlog. So today we have legendary Chicago investigative mob reporter on the show with us live, John the Bulldog Drummond. So without further ado, I want to just put a quick shout out there to Anthony DiMartini and Street Stories for putting together a really cool video that we're gonna show you guys. And we'll wait as you guys come on in here. Check out this video.
Wemette would not disclose where he is living now. However, he says he eventually hopes to come back to the Chicago area to stay. John Drummond, Channel 2 News. But Red Wemette's future is far from bleak. He got a good chunk of change when he sold the Old Town building containing the bookstore and his apartment. And Wemette is a bright and resourceful individual who could do very well in many fields. His first contact, by the way, with an FBI agent was back in 1971. It sounds like it came from out of an espionage novel. Wemette and the agent met by prearrangement at the Lion House at the Lincoln Park Zoo.
Do you think we'll hear from Wemette again?
I think we very well might.
I thought I was on the forecastle of a tramp steamer. The way the oaths and curses went up. Now, we're going to try to talk to some of these fans, and if they get unruly, we go back to you. Listen, knock it off.
What do you think? How do you assess Mr. Ford as far as labor is concerned?
You're trying, I'll say that for you.
Never give up.
Greetings, thank you, and have a happy Easter.
And thank you for sitting in for Bill for a week.
Top Banana's back on Monday, and I go back to being a spear carrier, but I enjoyed it. Okay. Well, I was going to say, okay, I'm getting the fist. That means to keep my trap shut. Get out of here.
I can give you another fist.
I can see that tomorrow night. This is John Drummond.
Hey, Red, how's it going today?
It's great. It's a great day.
I think it's going to be an awesome day, and I think this is going to be one of the best broadcasts that we've done yet. No, I really do.
I do too.
QQ Guru, thanks for the shout outs. Anthony DiMartini. Everybody, if you haven't checked out Anthony's channel, go over there, check it out. That video we just played was off his channel, which I'm sure Anthony is okay with. And if you like Chicago history, be sure to check out his channel. He does videos about all kinds of things. So Greg Bradshaw, it's good to have you. Scott H., Brian Glade, William Kirchmayer, how's it going? He's a member of the channel. Catherine Guerrero, it's good to see you. And I hope that you and James are having a great day. Don Berlin, Michael Wiggins, Bobby Bag of Donuts, Scott, Keith Helton, Sean Pender, Brian Glade. Thanks. Bringing up the suit again. Frank Ferraro, Ken O'Connell. Mike Alexander is here, as well as Michael Graham. Don Ciccio Di Porzalo, happy birthday. It's good to see you. It was his birthday last week, guys. Jim Yeager, Ken Connell, Luminous Grin. Yeah, thanks. Go prescribe to Anthony DiMartini. You're welcome, Anthony. Thank you for putting that really cool intro together for us for John Drummond, whom we have with today. And Randy Rhodes, we're going to get into this in just a second. Larry Lapper, Eric G, Outfit Boss. It's good to see all of you. And I hope that you brought your comments. I hope you brought some questions, because it's not every day that you get to talk to John Drummond, okay? When Red was saying to me, oh, I talk to John all the time on the phone, and it was John who told me I got to write the book, Nobody Cares, and what I did about it, right? Well, I'm Greg Polly. Good to see you. Got the ponytail going, don't you? So this is really cool. Red is this is just, I'm excited. Craig Hart, Nicholas Como, Joey Ayupa, Homan Sanders, Dave Pritchett, good to see you. Robert Balk, good to see you. Everybody, TC, thanks for coming in today. If you don't know who John Drummond is, then you're obviously not from Chicago.
Or you've been living underneath a rock, because he did things in Las Vegas too. His affiliate in Las Vegas, they used to have him on out there.
Okay, I saw one of those clips when he was standing out in front of the old Flamingo and the old Caesar's Palace back when it had the fountains. It's all different now. Completely different. So, completely disinterested. Good to have you with us. Thanks for being interested in us. So,
hit that like button, folks. If you don't hit it now, hit it before you leave, because John's waiting.
Hit the like button. Let's see this get out there to a lot of people, and a couple more people coming into the room. It's good to see you guys. It's good to see you. So, John, how are you today?
Well, let me put it this way. I better cut the mustard on this show with that big promotion that I got. And I got to thank Mr. Martini. He was the man who created that those film or tape or film clips that you used. They were nice to bring back a lot of memories. And so with this type of a buildup, I better produce. Let's just put it that way.
I see that he has a good sense of humor. And I saw in one of the clips, John, that Anthony put together, the one guy kind of shrugged you off and said, you keep trying. And you said to him, I never give up. I like that motto.
That might have been, I think that was George Meany, who was at one time the powerful head of the CIO.
No, it was Williams, Roy Williams.
John? That was at McCormick Place, if I recall. There was a convention there, and Meany talked, and we followed him out, and you heard the reply finally when he finally opened his mouth, but wouldn't say any union secrets to us. But at least we got him to talk.
Did you ever try to interview Joey Doves Ayupa?
Yes, I have on several occasions. Number one, when he was in Kansas, I did interview. Number one, let me tell you a story on Ayupa. He was very reticent, very hard to get pictures of. And when he was summoned before a grand jury at the old courthouse, the Layton courthouse, we had a crew there. There was a newspaper person there, a woman, a photog, and he kicked her when he came out of the car because he'd never been he was very hard to photograph. And our cameraman there was very aggressive to him, put the camera right to his face and walked him all the way up to the steps of the criminal courts building inside. And he was very unhappy about that. And I saw him in Kansas City when he was on trial in the Skim case in the elevator. I go in the elevator, lo and behold, who's in the elevator but Joey the Dubs Ayupa. And he brought it up right away. So he still remembered it well. He said, I don't mind you taking my picture, but I don't like anybody ramming the camera right up in my face. And so I told him, well, the guy that was shooting you probably was a little too aggressive, but he was freelancing. He was trying to catch on with the job. And that's why he did such a good job for us. Maybe not for you, but it probably won't happen again. But I've never interviewed him on camera. I also talked about going in and out of the building at that time when the trial was on, but he would not go on camera. He would, as you talked to, just like Jackie Cerrone. I had some great conversations with Jackie during that trial. He was the number 2 man in the mob. But when it came to the camera, it was a no-no. He wouldn't say anything.
Wow. So John, what was it like? How did you get into it? First off, Was this something you fell into? Is this something that you pursued as far as being the mob reporter in Chicago?
Well, I'll tell you what really started my interest in organized crime. Particularly, first of all, when I was a little kid, I was maybe 9, 10, 12 years old. The neighbor, I grew up in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and a neighbor there would come up he was a neighbor, he was a friend of a neighbor, would come up every year at Christmas time. He was a bachelor, and he worked for the Department of Public Works for the city of Chicago under Ed Kelly, of course, was the mayor then, and he told all these fancy stories about corruption and all the mob and going on. I found that very fascinating, but it really wasn't until 1950 what really turned me on. I was in Milwaukee at the time. I'm walking down Wisconsin Avenue, and there's this huge crowd in front of an appliance store where TV was on. And I remember at that time, TV was a brand new baby in 1950. And the crowd was all watching the kefauver crime hearings. Senator Estes Kefauver of Tennessee, was barnstorming around the country, going to major cities like New York, Chicago, and otherwise, and televising these mob people who had been subpoenaed to testify before his committee. And it was very fascinating for the public who'd never seen these guys before. To veteran newsmen and to go to the authorities, it was old hat. They knew who these stories were, but the public didn't know that stuff. The famous shot I was watching that day was Frank Costello, who was known as the prime minister of the underworld. He was the New York mobster and the head of the outfit of all the 5 families in New York at the time. And he did not want his face taken, so they made a compromise and they shot his hands. So they showed his hands all the time during the thing. And the only thing I remember, they asked the chairman of the committee, asked him, "Did you ever do?" He said, "What did you ever do for your country?" He said, "I pay my taxes." And that got quite a laugh from the crowd. I remember that, but that sort of whetted my appetite. Seeing these guys parading before those cameras was pretty exciting. And of course, they also had a woman by the name of Virginia Hill, who was the girlfriend, of course, of the guy that was Benjamin Siegel. And she said, I can't say what she said, but in a closed-door session, Senator Toby, an older man in his 70s, could not understand why you, a young lady, why were all these mobsters so interested in you? And she gave an answer that I don't think I could say on the air right now.
You can say it on the air, John. Go ahead.
What's that?
You can say it on the air. Go ahead.
I can say what she said. All right. Yeah, she said I give the best blow job you can get. Bang. And that was it. And Toby did that was not on top public. That was in a private session when she said that. But that's obviously that got leaked out. That was quite a story about her.
Yeah, well, that's funny, John, because I tell that story on the Vegas mob tour. But I guess she said that in the rawest, crudest way possible, right?
Yes, she did. Very much so. Oh, God, yes. She did that indeed. There was no question about that. But that part of it sort of whetted my appetite. And I also been always interested in what I called paramilitary or fascist or Nazi organizations like some work I did in graduate school was involving communism and fascism. And some ways, believe it or not, the mob, I felt that there's something very similar. I don't mean that they are communists. I don't mean they're Bolsheviks or anything like that. But the idea is paramilitary. There's no elections are not. It's co-opted leaders. You're going to take over. You don't have real elections. Discipline is handed out very ruthlessly for those who don't obey and cut the mustard. So that was very similar in that sense. Not as I indicate. So all those things combined and coming into Chicago and other markets I worked, I was always interested in Rockford in mob guys too. They had them in Rockford, they had them in Des Moines, they have them all over in any semblance of any size city at one time. I don't think that's so much the case anymore. But organized crime in those days, when I started working in the 60s and 70s, that was in their heyday. There's no ifs and buts about it.
So these guys like to stay low profile and stay off the radar. So
absolutely, they do not like a person that's why they didn't want to go on television. And some of these guys, I remember William Butch Petrocelli, that name may not ring a bell, but Petrocelli and Harry Alleman were considered by the authorities, the police here, homicide, as responsible for a number of gangland murders. Petrocelli he did anything to avoid being on camera. And what happened one time, I was in the federal building. He was up on a charge there, and I remember I was upstairs. Wasn't with my camera crew, and he was boasting to the people milling around outside the courtroom. I faked the jag out of that cameraman down there. Ha ha ha. So what I called out the troops, and we had there's only 2 outlets in those days you get out of the building. The rest was no, supposedly. So we get a shot of Petrocelli. I spent full court press on him. And you know what happened? And 2 aggressive cameramen. He got out on a door they were not supposed to get out on because the guards let him out. and he had retained a private attorney, Anthony Pellicano. You tell me what happened. Why did those guards let the guy out? They probably let him out because I'm sure, and I hate to say this, but no question about it, they were paid off. And the Sellers didn't get Petrocelli then, but we came back to haunt him. We got Butch Petrocelli on camera, and it's damn lucky we did, because it was about 8 or 9 days later, he was found out in the trunk of, and it is the car. His face had been burned. He was torched. A blowtorch did him in a car accident. And the reason why guys like Petrocelli, some of them were eager, were so leery to get on camera. They weren't that camera shy for that just alone. They were camera shy because they knew if somebody might see him, somebody sitting home in Melrose Park or Elwood Heights, whatever it could be. Hey, that guy, they say, he's the guy I saw running from that crime scene. That's the guy who, and that's what they don't want to take a chance of, that somebody might recognize him and then call, drop a nickel and call the police department. So a lot of those guys were very, 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 very conscious about that.
That's Anthony DiMartini said, with a mug like Butchie Petrocelli, I'd avoid cameras too.
Yeah, well, you got a point there. He was not. See, what I ran into him when we had our discussion. There was a Italian-American Boxing Hall of Fame dinner at the Holiday Inn back in 1977. All the former Italian champions were there. Being a real boxing fan, I really wanted to see that. Joey Giardello, Carmen Basilio, Willie Pep, etc., Jake LaMotta, you name it. And Petrocelli was there. There was a lot of outfit guys there, to put it mildly. And Petrocelli came up to me and said, any hard feelings about the other night? Meaning the fact why he got out of that building. I said, Butch, I wasn't sore at you. I was sore at the guards that let you out. That was our beef that we had with them. Well, he said, okay, but he said, no pictures. I said, well, be no pictures. If you walk in front of that camera when we're talking these boxers or introducing these boxers, you're going to be on camera. And he said, all right. Then he went away. Then he came back. He said, no pictures. I said, Butch, there won't be any pictures unless you get close to us. He was that conscious. He did not want to be photographed at all. He was an obsession about it.
Wow.
But, as I indicated, we did shoot him as a turn coming out of a funeral parlor. And then himself, he was in the same Salerno funeral parlor over in Harlem Avenue. And about 6 or 7 days later, I think he was waked there himself. So we got him just in time, so to speak, to do the story on him when he got killed.
Wow.
He vanished. Actually, he disappeared at first. They didn't find the body. He was gone 24, 25 days, but it was pretty obvious that he'd been hit, and he was. Just like the Spilotros, when they vanished at first. There was no question in my mind that they'd been killed, and they were, of course.
Were you ever, speaking of being killed, were you ever have your life threatened by any of these guys while you were on the job?
Not really per se. We've got questions. Take it easy, guys. Beefing, indicating that I should perform a sexual act on myself, which is impossible to do. Indicating that my relatives were four-legged creatures, so on and so forth, like that. And a couple take it easy. I've had several things off camera. They would say that, but nobody said we're going to put you in cement shoes or anything like that. I'll tell you one reason why that would be, because at that time, the Chicago mob was very well disciplined. That was under Anthony Accardo, who realized that to keep out of to kill a newspaper man or a reporter or something, or a policeman, could be very counterproductive. Case in point, to show you what can happen when that does happen, was in Arizona in 1976. A reporter there from the Arizona Adams, he'd done some stories on some racketeering in the Phoenix area. And apparently he crossed, somebody said, we got to get rid of this guy. He turned on his car one day in the morning, got out to work, turned on the ignition, he was blown to smithereens. And what happened after that, because of that incident, you had a coalition of newspaper reporters, electronic reporters coming over from the country to Phoenix to put pressure on the authorities in Maricopa County to find out who was responsible for the newsman's death. And that caused a lot of grief, as you can imagine. And Accardo, when Accardo had it particularly in command, I didn't think he wanted problems like that. Remember, in Chicago, the only person that was ever killed that was a newsman, to my knowledge, was a guy by the name of Jake Lingle. And that's going back to the Capone era. And he was killed down at the Illinois Central Railroad Station down in the Loop. And of course, when that happened, Jake Lingle, the newspaper reporter, was slain. Colonel McCormick, of course, was the boss of the Chicago Tribune in 1933, had a hemorrhage. One of our men has been killed by the mob. We're going to crack down that Capone mob, and we're going to put them where they belong, in prison. Well, what happened instead, a reporter for the Tribune worked with Lingle, and he went up and told the colonel and the people in command. He said, sir, I think you should realize before we do this, Jake Lingle was on the payroll of Al Capone. So Ed Brady didn't count as a reporter being slain because he was part of the mob. The only case here that I know of in the Chicago area where a reporter, I think, had to be murdered was a woman, but a woman who was killed in Will County. Gosh, I've got a mental block right now. Her name, I should know what it was. Back in 1957, she worked for a suburban newspaper in Will County out of Joliet, where she told about some gambling, organized crime gambling units going on in Will County. And apparently the people down there did not appreciate that. And Molly, first name was Molly. Molly disappeared back in 1957, and her body has never been found. She's never been found. I recall going down to Joliet back around 2000, 2001, where they were digging up a sidewalk in downtown Joliet. There's some rumor they had some inside information that there was human remains down there. It might have been Molly. That was not the case. She has never been found. So she is the only one in Chicago that I can recall, Chicago area, that I call was murdered by the mob who was in the news business, other than Lingle, who really was not, because he was actually an outfit guy to begin with.
Wow. Michael Cagnoni blew up in his Mercedes on the ramp.
Oh, that was unbelievable. He was Michael Cagnoni was in the trucking business, and he was going to work in his Mercedes on the tri-state, and seeing that scene there, it was coming off. I think he was coming off the Hinsdale exit, whatever it was, and a bomb detonated in his vehicle. He was blown to smithereens. The car was literally just completely, almost completely obliterated. It was a brutal scene. And apparently Cagnoni was having trouble with the mob, was cutting in. They wanted some this or that, whatever it was. Even on the trial that came out, and Cagnoni's murders were supposedly brought to justice. We still don't know for sure 100% why Cagnoni was killed, but it was a business deal. The mob was trying to muscle in on his business, or either that, or he wasn't paying up his street tax as he should have been, and he was killed in that brutal manner like that. That was a shocking case. It was of any bombing I've ever seen. I've never seen anything like that.
Our viewers are all saying that it's Molly Zelko.
There, she got $10 silver to that gentleman or lady that called you in. It's Molly Zelko from Joliet. That's why they pay those people big money out there. See, that's why I don't get that. It was Molly Zelko. I couldn't think of his last name.
No, the viewers, they help us. They're the ones that make the show. They want to know though. Did you ever interview Joe Lombardo?
Yes. Oh, yes. Not in fact, as a matter of fact, I still have a picture. I'm going to get on my birthday coming up. I told my son, man, to get a frame on that picture I got with Joe Lombardo when he didn't know he's being photographed in front of the Dirksen Federal Building. But I talked to Joe quite a bit, believe it or not, off camera again. First of all, when he was on trial in 1982, in connection with the Dorfman case and Roy Williams, he was on trial for trying to bribe a U.S. senator. And by the way, one of the first time we ought to get into this, that audio tapes were ever used in a trial, in a prominent federal trial, and that's what resulted in those convictions. Without that, they wouldn't have got it. But before each day that Joe would make the news matters, just myself and others, in front of the courtroom before he went in, and he always had some jokes. For example, I remember one joke he said. He said, he contended in one story I had, which is lied. He said, "That's not true what you said, you lied." I said, "I don't lie in those stories." "Yes, you do. And I'll tell you when you would. Your wife gets a new dress. She'll come home and she spent a lot of money on the dress. And she says, 'How does it look?' And you don't like it. What do? You lie and you say, 'It looks good, dear.'" Another story he said I remember he said, "I was never in the military. I had stomach trouble." "Yeah, what was the matter, Joe?" "No guts," he said. But that was his idea as a good joke. And I thought they were pretty good jokes myself. Anyway, I'll say that. Except the day when that jury came in 1982, in December that year, there was nothing funny about Lombardo when he walked in that day. He looked in very bad mood because he knew probably that he was going to face some lengthy incarceration, and he did. Of course, he was found guilty in that case. But in Lombardo, this is after he got out of prison, when he came out around 79, and he even took an ad in the paper saying that I'm not a member of the mob or anything like that. I'm just a clean-cut citizen, in effect, what he said. Taking an ad in the paper, that was a great story. But Lombardo called me on 2 different occasions on the phone. And in both cases, he was talking about, he was so upset that he would see street violence in Chicago, things of that nature, young people being murdered, gangbangers, and so on and so forth. And he said, "Look at what happened." He said, "I'm the only guy that went to jail for trying to sell a piece of land to a senator, and I had to do time on that." He was very embittered about that. What had happened was, really, why he was convicted, along with Roy Williams and Alan Dorfman in that case, was they were trying to bribe a U.S. senator in connection with a bill that they wanted a bill that would block. At that time, they're trying to get a bill through that would regulate the trucking industry. Well, the Teamsters did not like that. And Howard Cannon of Nevada, I think he was either chairman of the committee or he had a prominent position to block or support it. And they leaned on him by letting him buy some property, supposedly. Then he would vote against regulation. In other words, deregulation. He wanted it regulated. The boys wanted to continue under regulation. And the deregulation bill did pass when Cannon found out that apparently the government had been eavesdropping on his conversations. All of a sudden, he flipped and voted yes. He said we should deregulate it. But the guys went to trial for their attempt to bribe those fellows. And Lombardo was very embittered about that. And also, he was embittered right away because he was thrown in. He did not make bond. They gave him an offer for a bond. He was remanded to custody. Well, Alan Dorfman, on the other hand, was freed on bond. Although he wasn't out very long before, as you know, he met his demise in January 1983 in front of the Purple Hotel and was shot to death. A homicide, by the way, that has not been cleared, ever been cleared on that case. There's rumors to who did it, but officially nobody was ever charged. Nobody was ever indicted in that case. That was a major one.
Wow.
And they remember going on that endorphin. When they came out with Family Secrets, we had to figure out, you need video. Video helps so much on television to show people. And we had pictures of Dorfman. I said, let's get our Dorfman file together because that's going to be sure. I'll bet one of the ones in Family Secrets that is solved, so to speak. And lo and behold, Dorfman case never came up at all. But as Red knows, I think Red has been interested in that case as well, as to who the actual killers were. He was shot. First of all, why Dorfman was shot. Here was a guy that was convicted, along with, as I said, Roy Williams, head of the Teamsters, and Lombardo, and he did face a prison term that could be substantial. And apparently, Ayupa and company began to wonder, can this guy take hard much time without start singing like a canary? And what really put the kibosh on poor Mr. Dorfman was he was also at that time under investigation in San Francisco. He was scheduled to go the next week out to San Francisco for a court hearing for an arraignment on whatever the case is, a corruption case he was involved in. He was a defendant in it, been named in the indictment. And the outfit, the Ayupa people, were worried, what if he goes out to San Francisco and he's remanded to custody? We'll never get the guy. So they decided apparently that he had to be taken care of, and he was shot as he was going into the restaurant of the Purple Hotel in Lincolnwood in broad daylight. That's when it happened, broad daylight. And the suspect, they say nobody was ever charged with it, although there's a lot of talk that people involved were big guys. One of them was, I think, Frankie Schweiss. Another was John Fecarata. Both are deceased now. And a third man who I'd never heard of before, who the government told me, the Justice Department told me, this is the guy that was the trigger man, a guy named Roy Spencer. Conveniently, after the murder, which is in January 1983, Mr. Spencer went down to Florida on vacation. And as I said, he drowned, supposedly in an accident. I don't know, but that was the end of Spencer, who they thought was definitely involved in, and probably Schweiss and Fecarata as well. So that case remains unsolved.
John, can you describe what happened when at Family Secrets when you tried to shake hands with me?
But what about Family Secrets? You're saying, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last.
I said when I was coming up and I had the FBI agents around it, you got up and we were going to shake hands. Do you remember that?
What happened? To you, I'm sure our audience knows, but Red Wemette was a key witness in the Family Secrets case, which is in 2007, which a number of mobsters, including Frank Calabrese Jr., Jimmy Marcello, and Lombardo went down. Red was brought back from his undisclosed location to testify for the government in connection with his dealings with Joe Lombardo and the tapes, of course, that they made with his spies and so on and so forth. And I recall sitting in the exterior, but not in the courtroom, and Red came by with an army of either marshals or I think they're FBI agents, and I got up trying to talk to him, but it was no dice. You think he was the president of the United States or Putin or somebody? You couldn't get near the guy. He was the hottest property in town at that time. They were guiding him that much, so I didn't have a chance to say hardly other than say hello to Red. That was it that day. But he was a key witness on that case. Did very well, even though he was cross-examined pretty thoroughly by the attorney for Lombardo, Rick Halpern, but he came by, and of course Lombardo was convicted in that Family Secrets case, which had a number of murders that were there. But I want to say one thing right now. You talk about trials, in my opinion, I'm sure there'll be others that would disagree emphatically. To me, the biggest trial that really brought the Chicago mob down was not Family Secrets. That's significant. I'm not bum rapping it. But I'm saying the biggest one that had the biggest impact was this trial in Kansas City called the Skim case. I went down there to cover that. You know who was convicted in that case? I'll tell you who. Joey Ayupa himself, Joey Lombardo, Jackie Cerrone, the number 2 man, Angelo Petra, the Chinatown boss, And then you had the guys from the suburbs, so to speak, or the satellite people like Frank Pellestreri in Milwaukee. The whole Kansas City crew went down. They also had a guy from Cleveland as well. Those guys all went down, and that was, I think, to me, that was the biggest blow to the mob that they ever had, because those guys were all key figures that went into jail. In both Lombardo, both Iupa and Cerrone died basically in jail. I think one of them came back for a couple of days when he was critically ill and died. But those are the guys they were the power brokers, because at that time Anthony Accardo was enjoying life pretty much out in the Palm Springs area, and he was pretty much sort of a chairman emeritus. The day-to-day decisions were made by people like Iupa and of course Cerrone, and Iupa is probably the one they feel that that Dorfman had to be killed. Iupa was a powerful guy, and he was the boss, and went down the drain on that one.
So
again, by the way, Cerrone, I mentioned on that trial, we had some good conversations. I was down there over a week, and the trial dragged on. Once the jury went out, took a while. But Iupa would come into the building and say, "Hello, Mr. Iupa, how are you today?" Blah blah. But he wouldn't talk. Cerrone would talk about things. He didn't talk mob secrets or anything. I didn't ask him. I said, "Who hit who? Are any new contracts out today?" No, we didn't talk about that. We talked about golf. But he felt, actually, I remember Cerrone was confident that the jury would be deadlocked and he'd get out. Well, it didn't turn out that way, and he spent the rest of his career in federal custody.
John, what do you attribute all these people talking to you? Nobody else got to them but you.
Well, off camera, I did talk to some people on camera, but they were mostly people that would consider lower echelon, although they're very interesting. Give their names. I tell you, I spent more time than I should have. Anytime I have a story with a crew, I'd go over to River Forest. At that time, Anthony Accardo lived there on Ashland Avenue. We'd cruise by there, always hoping that Tony would come out. Now, I went down to Florida when he was on trial there on a corruption case, scam case involving the labor's union and so on and so forth. By the way, he was acquitted, but we'd stop when he'd come in the building, but he'd never say anything more than hello, goodbye, nothing like that, or nice day, something like that. He would not talk. And that same was true. I sat one time out of Binion's Restaurant, which is no longer their good German food, by the way, right on Plymouth Court near the federal building. He'd just been acquitted in connection with the gun case before Judge Will. Came out, we got into the building before we got there. We sat out there in the winter. I spent 2.5 hours waiting for him to come out, and he had to laugh because he knew that we were freezing our fannies off when he came out. But he brushed right by it, very pleasant. But he didn't. The thing about Accardo, he never didn't put up his face and hide. He didn't run away. He didn't try to throw punches at you, curse you, or anything like that. He acted, I'll have to admit, like a gentleman. No question about it. But he was the boss. You wouldn't want to cross him. That's for sure.
So William Kirchmayer has a question here, and he said, Mr. Drummond, do you recall the accountant at, I believe it's Balmoral Park, who embezzled and bought a bunch of World War II German vehicles and Nazi stuff, and he ripped off the outfit?
No, you got me there. I don't know that guy in Balmoral Park. That was, of course, a harness track south of the city for those people listening that didn't know, but it was
Perry Cure, maybe?
I heard something about it, but I don't remember. Other than that, that was about it. I can't give you any details about it. So I'm afraid I don't think I can fill you in on anything like that to his name or what exactly happened to him.
Gotcha. Guys, hit the like button if you're just coming in. Legendary John Drummond is on with us today. So if you have questions, be sure to put them into the comments. Brian Glade's wondering, did you ever go to Hoagie's?
Oh, yeah, I mean, out of North. That was the Spilotro place. That was a ham. I think it's the Mrs. Oh, yeah, that's where Spilotro once in a while would be. And a guy named George Bell, I think, owned it with the manager there. A guy named George Bell. I still have in my possession, by the way, a card offering free drink at George Bell's Hoagie's Pub in North Avenue. But I don't think it's there anymore. I think what happened was it came out during that family secrets trial right after that the Spilotros owned the thing, and Mrs. Spilotro owned that property. That is Tony's wife. And I don't know what happened. I think it was sold. And I don't even know if it exists anymore. But that was a hangout. Hoagie's was a hangout for a lot of outfit guys. Lombardo, of course, would be there when Tony would be in town. And there was a deli across the street on North Avenue. A lot of guys hung out there, too, I remember. And I can't remember the name of that right now. But, yeah, Hoagie's Pub with George Bell. And, yeah, it was a good spot out there, right? And there was Rockies out there, too. A lot of the guys hung out at Rockies in Melrose Park. That was a little farther west there, I remember, in Proviso Township. That's, by the way, Jeff, here's a story that's a good mystery to him. And I got a guy named Sal Puglia. That probably doesn't ring a bell. But he was the township committeeman for Proviso Township. He was a young Democrat on the way up. And one night he went to Rockies and left the place, and nobody's ever seen him since. Another guy that they believe is murdered. So you Hawkshaws out there, if you think there's no more mysteries in the Chicago mob or outfit like that, there's still plenty of mysteries of people that vanished, not just Molly Zelko. Sal Puglia was another one that disappeared and has never been found. He's gone.
Tony Zizzo.
Pardon?
Tony Zizzo.
Okay, that's the last of the lot. In 2006, I remember he lived in Westmont, if I recall. Tony Zizzo was convicted in a case I remember going to that was headed by, he worked with Jimmy Marcello and, my gosh, I got it, Sam Calabrese. Sam Calabrese was the, not Calabrese, no, that's not him. I've got a mental block on the name of the guy here. I should know the guy. He was running the mob for a while there. And Zizzo testified in that trial, and then in 2006, he told his wife, I think he was going to a steakhouse in Melrose Park, and his car was found there, and he has disappeared and has never been seen since. So that's the last of the mob guys that I can recall. The last mob hit, I know that would be a big one, but his body has never been found either. He's disappeared as well. So they still have some vanishing acts around there. I'll tell you that much. And Zizzo was the last one. He was a short guy. I remember that, but I can't think of whatever the hell happened to Zizzo is a good question, but they assume he'd crossed. I heard different stories that one of the reasons he was taken out was a dispute over video poker games, who had stuff of that stuff going on, and that ended that apparently. And that was, if that's true, I don't think anybody really knows why he was killed, but that was one of the stories. It's what happened to him. And
they called him Little Tony.
Yeah, he was a short guy. Remember, he was only about. I remember at the trial, he was only a guy, basically about 5'2" or so. He was not a big guy. He was not a big guy at all. No, he's not a big guy at all. And then suddenly, I think the guy that I'm talking about was Sam Carlisi. I said Calabrese, which of course is not correct. Sam Carlisi, during at one time when Ferriola died and someone took over the mob, he himself died, but he was a defendant in the same case along with Jimmy Marcello and Zizzo, and they're all convicted. And Carlisi was his boss. Now, a lot of people thought Marcello was calling shots from the jail cell even after he got convicted at Family Secrets. And he probably might have been, for all I know. But why Zizzo was killed, the only theory I ever heard was a dispute over, apparently, video poker games. And he wanted his share and they wanted their share, whatever it was, if that's even true. But he's gone. There's no question about that. He left his Westmont home and that was the end of it.
So here's a question for you, John. And this was asked a little while ago by Loa. But what do you know about the Wild Bunch member, Anthony Little Tony Borsellino? He was killed for
yeah, he was murdered. I remember that covered. I remember coming on. I think we got to shot him on the pavement or something like that. He was a friend of who did Tony was. And then one guy was upset that he was killed. I remember that at the time. You're going back. I think Borsellino was killed. It was at the late 70s, early 80s, something like that.
Why did they do it? He was a good earner or a good enforcer.
I know he was. I never heard. That was a good question. Who would you? Some of those slain, some of those guys that died, we never officially got. Well, officially, we never knew on many of them. Why? What happened? Why? What was it? It was obviously a beef between some of the different crews or different guys. Like, for example, during the Family Secrets case, the first case they considered in the Family Secrets case was Hambo Albergo, whose body was found by Comiskey Park. And one of the reasons he was killed, they said why he was killed was apparently he vowed he wanted a bigger share of supply or he was going to tell tales out of school. And so they decided to kill him. But why Borsellino? I've never heard for sure of Tony Borsellino was killed. No, I don't know. There's still a lot of them out there. We don't know why they're slain. Absolutely not. They just, who was a guy named Sambo Cesario? I remember covering that. He was shot in front of somebody's house over, was it Melrose Park or somewhere on the west side? To this day, we don't know for sure. By the way, nobody was ever arrested in that one. He was sitting on a lawn chair when two guys came up and plugged him in broad daylight out there, I remember. But there's, again, a case where nobody knows for sure why he was slain. Who knows? And also, there's sometimes personal matters. Some of these guys are playing around with somebody's girlfriend, and sometimes the murder has nothing to do with outfit business at all. But it could be a personal thing. That happens too. You can't rule that out by any means.
Sure. It doesn't always have to be business, right?
Right. It doesn't always have to be that way.
Yeah. Frank Ferraro is wondering, were you ever in the courtroom when Sam DeStefano went wacko?
No, damn it, I was downstairs with him. I'll tell you that much, which is funny. No, by the way, for your people who are listening and watching, that Sam DeStefano was killed in 1973. he was called the Mad Hatter of the mob. He was a very mercurial guy. You never knew anything about him. I'm going to give you a story about Sam that I had personal with Sam DeStefano. In 1972, you remember the movie, The Godfather opened up to a lot of play, and I had the bright idea. Wouldn't it be nice? We'll bring Sam DeStefano into the station to review the movie. He could tell us about the inner makings of the mob. Station at first liked the idea, and so I approached. DeStefano was on trial at that time. I can't give the specific reason. He was on trial so many times. So I met him upstairs outside the courtroom, and I introduced myself and made that proposition. And he thought, yeah, it might be a good idea. Of course, he probably wanted some compensation to do it. I don't doubt that. And then he came down, and apparently we took a picture with his wife, happened to be with him. That's where we took the picture. Then he blew up completely. But he still didn't change his mind on that. But to put it bad, in fact, Irv Cupson had in his column about how we were trying to have Sam to review the movie. And he said, but cooler heads in New York prevailed. They put the kibosh on the idea. So it never materialized. But here's a story about DeStefano that I was not in the courtroom when he went in his annex, but downstairs before that happened, he held it. That was back again, I think around 72, when there was several people vying for the state's attorney's job other than Ed Hanrahan. And one of the guys who lost in the primary held a news conference, was scheduled to have the news conference down in the lobby of the Federal Building. So they had the mics all set up, and Sam comes back from lunch. And the mics were not for him. They were for this guy running for state's attorney. And Sam goes over to the microphone. Can you believe it or not? And he starts ranting and raving. So we got a great shot of him on film, needless to say. But that's what he could tell you. And then the guy gets hot and leaves all of a sudden. Somebody brought up in that news conference, if you call it with Sam, about his brother Mario. And all of a sudden, his whole, I remember, demeanor changed, and he got upset and walked away. So you had to treat that guy with 10 foot. You had to be very careful of him.
That's
to this day, by the way, they never, incidentally, there's another murder that was never officially cleared, although they feel that Spilotro was involved in it. Definitely, there's Tony Spilotro, and Sam was shot with a shotgun in his own garage, thinking that he himself, what happened was that Sam DeStefano, Mario DeStefano, his brother, and Tony Spilotro were going on trial in connection with the murder of a guy named Leo Foreman. I'm going back now many years. Now, a key witness that could put those guys in the sea who worked with him was a guy named Grimaldi. A guy named Chuck Grimaldi was the guy that was a key witness for the government who'd worked with these guys. And what happened, apparently, the regime or somebody with the outfit hierarchy said, we got to get this Sam. You can't trust this guy in a courtroom. What he's going to do? So they decided they had to put him away. And so he got a call, apparently, on some Saturday morning. They called Sam and said, look, we're going to get rid of this Grimaldi today. You're going to come with us. Okay. He had his hit clothes on. I'll meet you in the garage. They came to the garage, and I think it was Spilotro. And I have his picture yet somewhere found in my files of the guy. His arm was actually severed by a shotgun blast, and he was killed. So he never testified in that trial against, that is, he never was a government defendant. And Grimaldi, of course, did testify. And Spilotro, he lived a charmed life. Mario DeStefano was convicted of this murder, believe it or not, and Spilotro was not. Now, how could that be? I sat in that courtroom of Judge Robert Meyer and I heard the testimony. One guy is not guilty and the other's guilty, but as it turned out, the appellate court, I think, threw it out. And so it didn't make any difference either way. But in those days, Tony Spilotro led a charmed life. You put him up before a bench, before a trial, and he always gets convicted. He usually was acquitted. I don't know how, but he did. But that's what happened to Sam DeStefano. I was not in the courtroom, but he was very mercurial. He used a bullhorn, by the way. He'd come in, and they actually would take it in and out of the courthouse at one time on the stretcher, claiming he was in ill health and had been beaten and things of that nature. So the guy was zany as can be. Dangerous man, though. He was a very dangerous individual. There's no question about it.
Do you remember when Joe Lombardo walked into the court with a newspaper as a disguise with a little cold?
In fact, the first time that ever happened, we were the only station, meaning Channel 2, that was not at that was over at the LaSalle at the traffic court. The traffic court was there, and we were waiting. We found how we were going to get pictures of Lombardo. It was very camera shy, and he came out this time. It was with his attorney, and he had a newspaper over his face, and we shot the whole thing as he walked to his car, along with a guy named James D'Antonio was his other defendant. And they went into the vehicle and left. And we shot both of them. We shot Lombardo walking all the way with that newspaper, which was then unique and different. It was funnier than blazes, to put it mildly. And then D'Antonio did us a favor, camera-wise. He started running up this, not on the street. he started running down the street. He's pretty big, tall guy. And I remember what we did that night on the air. We got mileage out of those shots. We then slow-mode Antonio after we got the shots of Spilotro running away from us and pointing out to Neil Armstrong, who was then the head coach of the Chicago Bears. We put it on slow motion. I said, look at this guy. Look at it. We got the Packers coming up this weekend. Look at the strides of this guy. What a wide receiver he can be. He's got good hands. He can move like a rocket. Why don't you sign him up? We had a lot of fun on that. So you'd have fun with those guys sometimes when they would do something like that. And later on, Lombardo did the same thing at the Dirksen building with his newspaper over his face, which again was shot. So that was great television. There's no question about it. People love to see that stuff. There's no denying that.
It's entertainment. Larry Lapper wants to know what do you know about Angelo LaPietra?
Well, he was known as the Hook. He was the boss of what they called the 26th Street or the Chinatown gang. And by the way, Angelo LaPietra, who is now deceased, he went to Danbury prison. He was one of the defendants in the in the Skim case in Kansas City. Of all the guys that I ever met at that trial, he was the most sour guy of all. He was always PO'd about something. I don't know what it was. He'd come up the steps grumbling and groaning, would see us and not curse or be, oh God. He was not, I don't think you want to spend a day or two BSing with him. He was not the friendliest guy, let's put it that way. And he apparently, if you believe the authorities and experts on these guys, that he was responsible for a lot of hits. He was and carried them out himself, either himself or would have one of his disciples do it. He had the Hook. He also had a gimp when he walked, so I don't think he was probably doing too much of that stuff. But he walked. Maybe he's grumpy about that, but he was crabbier than hell. That's the only word to describe it. But he went to jail on the family secrets case. But he was the boss of the Chinatown, and he had brother Jimmy the Lapper, they called him, who was also involved in organized crime. There was both Angelo and Jimmy the Lapper, who were the Chinatown guys at that time. And but they all did time. Jimmy did time too as well. He's now deceased. But Angelo was the boss. Angelo the Hook was the boss.
Everybody is commenting about your memory right now, saying that you're seriously still sharp as a tack. You got a photographic memory. It's like you're still living in that time period. You're describing things as if they're happening in real time.
I've been doing freak memory, and I apologize. Let me explain one more item about Angelo LaPietra. After he went to jail, this I could not figure out. He lived down on Princeton in the Bridgeport area there. He had a beautiful home. Now, there's nice homes, don't get me wrong, in Bridgeport, but not these really expensive type of homes you think on the North Shore overlooking Lake Michigan. He had a big place like that. And remember, he had a sign out on that door of his, on the driveway, "Trespassers will be shot." Well, that's not the end of the story. When he died, his wife still lived there. And apparently, Jerry Scalise and a couple of his associates, the brain Rachel, decided that might be a pretty good place to hit. That is the house with the mother. Because at that time that was going on, Calabrese, that is Frank Calabrese, was in jail, and the FBI was able to get up to his home in either the Lake Geneva area, and they found some money in a wall or something there. And apparently that Scalise and his partner, the brain Rachel, decided, hey, maybe there's some money at the house, and they were going they arrested. What's that? Nobody's scruples. Okay. And what happened? And later, by the way, Scalise and Rachel went to jail. I know what's happened. Oh, that's not too long ago. They're not young men at the time. I think they're both out of jail right now. But they never went into the house. But that stunned everybody that you would go into a widow of a boss and do that. But apparently that's what they had planning to do. I think I remember the tape. The government would read like one of the guys, they had the car wired or whatever it was, and one of the guys, there was a third guy in it other than Rachel and Scalise. That is outside the house of Mrs. LaPietra, and he had to get out and potty. He had to piss. So I think that's when they made the binge, believe it or not. So it helps to have good kidneys if you're going to work for the outfit. Remember that. That's pretty awesome. Everybody's saying like if you're a subject, you're a master on this subject, and it's like it could take 15 years to debrief you if we sat here and just continued to talk. I don't know about that, but we had a good memory. But also that I was not one of the players. Remember, I just reported what was going on. Certainly covered the Dirksen building, a lot of those trials, a lot of stories. Spent wasting a lot of time trying to get pictures and tapes of these guys or trying to interview them. Although you mentioned the interviews, I'll tell you, a guy was very interesting. and a guy named Larry Neumann. That name.
Somebody, Steve Karras just asked. Please ask John about Larry Neumann. Please tell us.
He was part of the Hole in the Wall gang in Las Vegas. That was arrested when the crew that worked for Spilotro were trying to break into a jewelry store in Las Vegas. Yeah. And a lot of those, that's when Frank Collada then later cooperated with the government. And that's one of the reasons that Lumen went to jail. But he was incarcerated here in Chicago at the time, not because of the Vegas thing, but in connection with the murder of a jeweler, a guy named Brown, that he was on Belmont Avenue, that they had charged him with. And I knew his lawyer, Adam Bourgeois, and he gave me a chance to talk to Larry, and we did a lengthy interview with him too. And I have to admit, now I was impressed by Larry Neumann. Here was a man I found out later that had well-to-do parents. That he was like an annuity every year. He had financial considerations. He didn't have to be an outfit guy. And when he was younger, man, he killed 3 people in a tavern up in McHenry County, apparently because somebody there was going out with his woman or something like that. So he took care of them. He believed his record showed a lot of violence. There's no denying that. He was a very fearsome guy. Of any of the people that worked with Spilotro, he was probably the most fearsome one they had. But it's funny, when I interviewed him, he admitted all sorts of bad things that he had done. He was very honest about it. But he said, believe it or not, I did not kill that jeweler. And he convinced me of it, I guess, because of that. But it was a lengthy interview. In fact, we sent the entire interview to KLAS in Las Vegas. They played the whole thing. Of course, he's a big name out there. But Neumann seemed quite articulate. He seemed intelligent, and it just didn't make sense why he embarked on a life of crime. But I think he liked the excitement of it. That was only one of the more interesting interviews we've had of those type of guys. Yeah.
Were you at the trial where Rika testified against Jackie Cerrone in 1970?
No, I was not. I was not at the trial in 70 there, but I did cover Rika's funeral. I was in the building. I remember one of the cases. We were trying to get pictures of him. He was on a stretcher or some damn thing like that because they were trying to deport Rika, Paul the waiter, to Italy, which they never did. And I went to his funeral, by the way, which was of any of the mob funerals I've ever been. In those days, they all showed up. You had everybody from the Chicago organization there that was anybody at that time, including, of course, Ricardo. I'm sorry. The funeral was not. No, the funeral was Phil Aldericio's funeral, and Rika and Ricardo came out together. Milwaukee Phil Aldericio died of a heart attack while he was doing time at the federal prison in Marion, Illinois. And for your viewers or listeners that are not familiar who he is, Milwaukee Phil Aldericio was a feared hitman, as well as an enforcer for the Chicago mob. And when he passed away, he was a loyal man, and everybody and their cousin came to that funeral. I remember we got the great picture that Ricardo was assisting. Ricardo was no spring chicken, but he was in good shape, helping Rika out of going to a car. It was a great shot we had, but I do remember how we got aced out. And I'm talking about you had a lot of still photographers. In those days, those still photographers were very sharp when it came to mob guys. They knew when to make them, as they use that term. We're sitting out there waiting for more of the luminaries to come out, and it's a hot day. And this guy comes by with his white shirt on, without a coat on. He said, guys, how's it doing? Hey, not too bad. Beautiful day, isn't it? Yeah, well, take it easy, he says, and walks away. Then all of a sudden, my retarded brain starts to go, my gosh, he said, that's Joe Gagliano. He aced us all out. We didn't get one picture of him, still or on camera. So we got aced out on that, but we got plenty of pictures of those other guys. And, of course, the show, remember, coming to a funeral also, the respect it shows who's who in the mob. That was the other thing about those affairs then, that those who showed up were in. Those who didn't, well, they're not there. And obviously, Ricardo and Rika, gosh, you had a big name, literally a who's who of the Chicago organization at that funeral. I remember that well.
You know any stories about the outfit and the Chicago outfit and New York mob interactions?
Not too much, but let's first of all say this right away. Some people, when I mentioned, bear in mind at one time, I think it was very safe. The Chicago at one time was probably the most powerful mob organization in the country in the 70s in that period. And right away, some New York, hey, what are you talking about? We got this family, we got that. That's exactly correct. The Chicago mob was monolithic. There's only one mob here. In New York, you had five different families, and a lot of mustache Pete's hitting there all the time. I was told this by authorities, everybody ranging. For one thing, I remember talking to some people in the Labor Department. They said the Chicago mob controlled there was four unions, for example, that were controlled by the mob. 3 of them were controlled by Chicago. The Teamsters, the Laborers International, and the Hotel and Restaurant Bartenders Union. The only one that was not controlled by the outfit that was not controlled by Chicago was the longshoremen, which were big on the East Coast and on the West Coast, not so big, obviously, in Chicago. And at one time, by the way, the longshoremen were a lot of communists involved in that with a guy named Harry Bridges. But that's how powerful Chicago, this labor department, they had three of those unions under their control. Others have told me that back in the 70s, at that time, Chicago controlled everything west of the Mississippi River. And that included Los Angeles, San Diego, Vegas, you name it. And I don't think it was any argument that said Miami, the East Coast guys, the New Yorker may have had control in Miami, but Las Vegas was not really, may have been called by some an open city, but the Chicago mob controlled it out there. There's no question about that. No question about that. And I could see why. Tony Accardo was asked one time on tape, had him on tape, didn't do that publicly, about the Los Angeles mob. He called them the Mickey Mouse Mafia. And I went out there one time. We did a story called Syndicate in the Sun to show how the Chicago mob's tentacles had moved out to the West Coast, San Diego, Los Angeles, Vegas, and so on. We covered, there's a big mob trial going on. Luckily, we hit it lucky when we hit LA with the leadership of the Los Angeles mob on trial, Dominic Brooklier, Jack Ragna, and several others whose name I can't remember right now. We got them as they came out of the building. Apparently, LA does not go big for that stuff. They didn't have any crew there at that time. I don't think they shot their pictures. They came out of the building. You know what they did? Instead of walking briskly by like leadership, they put their hands over their heads like this to hide and walked by. No wonder Accardo called them the Mickey Mouse Mafia. They looked. If I was in the Los Angeles mob and my boss went out like that, I said, what kind of a jackrabbit? What is this guy doing? How weak are these guys? These guys are leaders? No, they're not leaders. And that's one thing about Accardo and company. He would not do something like that. But as I say, according to a lot of people I talked to in that heyday, we're talking now starting in the 70s and maybe a little before, the Chicago mob had control over just either that or a very good piece of the entire West Coast area that was lucrative.
So, John, we're coming up to an hour mark here, which is usually how long we go. I want to ask a couple more questions, but
yes, by all means.
Red's been holding up a couple of your books. One of them's the can you hold it up again, Red? There, thanks. It's the 30 years in the trenches. Is that the first one you wrote or the second?
That was the first one. My second book was It Ain't Pretty, But It's Real. The second one has more stories about organized crime than the first one did. The first one had a lot of characters that, frankly, the first book may have been a little better, but the second book dealt more with organized crime in there. I know that in some of those stories. Yeah.
It ain't pretty, but it's real. And
that's correct. The second one is It Ain't Pretty, But It's Real.
We'll put links in the description below, guys. So if you want to get a copy of John's book, you can just click on the link down in the description. Hit the like button, guys. I'm about to ask a really cool question. Make sure you hit the like button, get this thing out there for everybody to see. John, Benny Fazio wants to know what your thoughts are if there's still a boss running the outfit these days.
Well, I think as you talked to, of course, I don't think the FBI had, at one time when I was working, we had so many, the police, the Cook County Sheriff's Department, so on, all had organized crime units. They don't have those anymore. If anybody asks who is running the mob right now, I don't think anybody can give you that answer, because I don't think it's for, you hear names like, some of the guys who come out of jail, Marco D'Amico, I don't think Solly De Laurentiis has got anything to do much anymore. You go about Albert Vina, I don't know, Joe Andriaki's even alive. Michael Sarno, a lot of people is considered the boss. I think he still might be in prison. So the names have circulated, but I don't think that there's, those five families and that we had here, not families, I'm sorry, crews. I don't know, but they even exist, like Grand Avenue and Elmwood Park and so on and so forth. I don't know. They don't have the gambling legalized and that, and then pot legalized. That's hurt them an awful lot. There's no question. The gambling has really hurt them because that was their biggest source of income. Right.
That's what I tell people on the mob tour. They all ask me that. I say the government took everything from them. What do they have left? So
that's exactly right.
Did the Chicago outfit? Will Mossy's wondering if the Chicago outfit considered themselves Cosa Nostra as they were on the LCN commission, or did they just consider the outfit completely separate?
No, I think they consider them part of the LCN. The word they don't like to be used here in Chicago is mafia, as you know. In fact, you can tell when the guy doesn't know anything about Chicago, because the Chicago mafia, the head of the Chicago mafia is Joe Blow, and so on, no. They never used that word at all. But the LCN, they did. Yeah, I think that's how FBI would always call them part of the LCN. Yeah.
And did you ever talk to, I'm sorry, Red, hold on, Red. There you go.
Did you ever, John, do you remember when they used to call them the syndicate?
Oh, God, that was before. I remember as I grew up, that's what people didn't use the word, the outfit. The syndicate meant the crime syndicate. That could be used in other cities, but the syndicate, like the syndicate control boxing, the syndicate does this, or they're running, had to pay tribute to the syndicate. Absolutely. I remember that was a term used back in the 40s and early 50s. Absolutely. I remember the syndicate. I remember a boxer. I interviewed a guy who was at, he didn't play ball with the syndicate, a lightweight fight, Freddie Dawson in Chicago. I remember what he said. He brought it up. He said, "Well, he said, I didn't play ball with the syndicate, and I never got a shot at the title." He used that word right there, and that was used in those days. Yeah.
Wow.
Never played ball with the syndicate.
Well,
John,
I tell you,
do you remember who was the guy that told me to write a book?
Well, I remember a guy told Red to write a book. I think it was the game by John Drummond was telling him that he had a book to sell, and he did have a book to sell, and it's done well. You betcha. That was a great idea. Red's got a great story. There's no question about it. Who else would put a video camera in his apartment and interview and try to entrap the likes of Frankie Schweiz and people like that? Not a very good idea for a long and lasting life. I'll tell you that right now.
Did you ever hear this?
Took a lot of guts.
Did you ever hear the story from Red about the camera or the microphone falling out on the back of the chair?
Yeah, I remember he told me a couple of stories where it looked, but they unfortunately, whatever you look at it, that they didn't catch on because otherwise he'd been minced meat. It was just not Schweiz, with other guys in there. It was Louis Eberle of Lombardo. You had the guy that from Pops with that guy. Well, he was the heavy hitter, but Schweiz was a very formidable guy. I don't think there's any question about that. That was proven, by the way. Remember that during the family secrets trial, and Red will confirm this, of course, that Mrs. Spilotro was on the stand and told that she was told by her husband Tony, if a guy, this Frankie Schweiz, ever comes around, is hanging around, call the police immediately. Even Spilotro and these people were afraid of Frankie Schweiz, the German, as he was called.
How did you guys?
Thank you, John, because it was good advice, and I have it all to you. I thank you because you're the one that motivated me.
Okay, well, I'm glad I did something in life there for them, and I did, but it worked out well, and I think it did. It has worked out well.
You've done a lot in life. You're a legend.
Well, I don't know about that.
According to all the viewers on the channel, you're a legend, and they're all they're enjoying.
Well, that's good to know because I always thought we met in a phone booth. There wasn't that many of them, but maybe there is. Okay, that's good news. I appreciate that. I really do. Seriously.
John, thank you so much for joining us and spending your afternoon here with us. Everybody had so many questions, and everybody just all the best comments, and everybody's thanked you for coming on today.
Well, if you need me, but maybe we can have a rematch sometime.
You want to do it again? Because we'd love to do it again. We'd love to have you on again.
All right, give me a call when you want to do it. Obviously, let's let the field lie fallow for a while first. But we shot our wad for a lot of stuff. But there's other things we can talk about. That's for sure.
Definitely. This was awesome. Thank you so much again for coming on.
Okay, keep in touch, guys. All right.
Hey, will do. Definitely.
I'll call you later, John. I'll call you later.
All right.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye. Red, that was freaking amazing, dude. Thank you so much for pulling those strings and getting John on. That was awesome. Everybody loved this. Hey, hit the like button, all of you. Hit the like button right now. All right, if you haven't hit the like button, seriously, there's almost like just 200 people in here watching right now. I mean, this is one of our higher viewed shows. So hit the like button if you haven't already. We're gonna hang out for a little bit afterward.
You got it, buddy.
All right. Hey guys, go over to Red's channel. I'll throw a link in there. Give me 5 minutes in the description of this video. All right. Sounds good. See you, Red.